Welcome to Andy Staples on 3. Greetings from Mobile. I'm here for the Senior Bowl. We'll talk about that in a little bit. We'll talk about QBs and who I'm excited to see. But we got to talk about rankings today. On3's final class of 2024 rankings came out on Monday. Charles Power, our director of recruiting, will be here a little bit later to talk about those rankings. And we got into a discussion of how they come together, how they're modeled, because I think people don't always understand how the rankings are put together. And in the case of the On3 rankings, they are made to kind of model the NFL draft. So you got your 32 5 stars. Those would be your first rounders. And also positional value is taken into account. But as Charles points out, there's a wide receiver at the top. And that wouldn't always happen in the NFL draft. Probably would very infrequently happen in the NFL draft. But that just tells you how good everybody thinks Jeremiah Smith is. And that's the wide receiver from South Florida who's headed to play at Ohio State. He's actually already in Columbus, already enrolled. He's going to be a fun one to watch. Couple of top 10 guys signing with the Florida Gators. Of course, the Georgia Bulldogs, a bunch of guys in there. Tennessee's got some guys. Auburn's got some guys. It's the wealth's been spread a little bit. The NIL era, the transfer portal era, the wealth has been spread around college football in terms of talent, and it's also affecting the high school guys because you've got more 5 stars going to more different schools, it seems, every year. And so this has become a little bit different project. And it's interesting because it evolves in real time. Like we had a ruling the other day about how we're going to handle short time signees like Julian Sayin, who was the top ranked quarterback in this class, who originally signed with Alabama. And then he decides to hit the portal when Nick Saban retires and he winds up at Ohio State. So we are just trying to get the arms around everything. And they're going to be late risers, late fallers. This is going to be very interesting because the ones, the guys that you think we have ranked too low, if they blow up, you'll happily throw that in our faces. The guys that maybe our folks liked a little better than some other companies' folks, well, the receipts get kept on all of those too. So we will see who winds up on top. Charles Power, I know he keeps track of that stuff pretty close. So we'll talk to Charles in a little bit about that. But first, we got to talk about something that happened in Ann Arbor on Monday. And we talked with Clayton Sayfie on Sunday night about what one of the most important things Sherrone Moore could do at Michigan. And that would be keep Ben Herbert, the strength coach. Well, we find out on Monday morning that's not happening. Ben Herbert is going to the Chargers with Jim Harbaugh, though. So what do? This is now the most important hire of Sherrone Moore's 4-day tenure. Well, you hire the guy who worked with Ben Herbert the entire time, Justin Tress, who came with Ben Herbert in 2018 to Michigan from Arkansas. So the idea is some continuity, more of what they've been doing, and you hope that stays the same. And that's what Michigan's trying to do. It's a very difficult needle to thread because you do want to establish your own program, but obviously what Jim Harbaugh was doing was working. So you want to try to keep as much of that as you can. Herbert was a pretty critical piece of that because he was such an instrumental person in developing a lot of the players that maybe didn't come as 5 stars, but are going to leave as NFL draft picks. So that's what Sherrone Moore has to do now. He's made the hire. It's probably going to be his most critical hire as Michigan's coach. We'll see what happens. I mean, this is one of those, this gets argued over, who is the best strength coach in the country. Ben Herbert was arguably the best one of the highest paid. Scott Sinclair at Georgia obviously is very good. We've seen other strength coaches come in and be able to revolutionize programs. Florida just made a change there. They're hoping Fitzgerald will come in and make a big difference in their program. And, we're going to find out. We're going to find out. You have the stalwarts like Rob Glass at Oklahoma State, who's been almost as important as Mike Gundy to Oklahoma State's success. So it is going to be very interesting to see Sherrone Moore put his stamp on this program. And that was one he was hoping he didn't have to do, because, it's one of those deals where the strength coaches in the NFL, not necessarily as valued as the ones in college football, but if Jim Harbaugh could offer Ben Herbert a really good deal, then maybe he wanted to go. And the other thing it tells you is that Jim Harbaugh probably has a lot of control with the Chargers. This is probably more control than your average NFL head coach. And look, he had leverage. He had the leverage to get that control. They just hired a GM who was the assistant GM with the Ravens, from the John Harbaugh tree. So this makes a lot of sense. Like when Jim Harbaugh negotiated for that job, he was able to negotiate quite a bit of power, and probably more than your average NFL head coach, because he had a contract back in Ann Arbor, if he wanted it, that would make him the highest paid college football coach in America. So that's how you lose your strength coach right there if you're Michigan. But we will see what the new administration can do. Justin Tress obviously learned under Ben Herbert. He's a young guy, and there'll be a lot of energy. The question is, will that do what it needs to do to keep that continuity in that program? We talked about it with Clayton on Sunday night, because Michigan's been in classes for a while, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for those guys to jump into the portal. They could just do spring practice, finish out these classes, and then decide if they want to. But I think they're in a good spot. I think that they do have a chance to keep almost everybody. And, it's interesting because the further away we get from the Alabama situation, where when Nick Saban retired, multiple guys went into the portal, you still look back at Alabama's roster now and you think, okay, now they still got a lot of 4- and 5-star talent. They still got a lot of really good players on that roster. I don't think it was as bad as it looked. So with Michigan, we'll see. We'll see. There's a lot of talent there. Somebody's going to try to get some of those guys to consider leaving. The question is, how much do they want to stay? And I would imagine, from talking to a lot of those guys before the national championship game, they do want to stay. And I think there's a lot of guys that want to stay and make it work with Sherrone Moore, that elevating him makes them want to play for Michigan even more. And so they're in a pretty good spot in terms of roster retention, even at a time when it's hard to keep your roster together. But we shall see. So later in the show, we'll talk to Ramon Foster, former Tennessee Vol, about Tennessee's potential to be one of the more improved teams in college football, about Nico-mania. Obviously, that's one of my pet topics, because I'm fascinated by Nico-mania at Tennessee, Avery-mania at Kansas State. I love the idea that these former 5-star quarterbacks are now ascending, and they are going to have their chance to put their stamp on these programs. And if they are really good, then they can take these programs to another level. Here in Mobile, you've got a bunch of quarterbacks who some NFL teams are going to hope can take them to another level. Now, the 3 headliners in this QB class, Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels, are not here in Mobile. But I am excited to see some of these other guys, because the more I read from folks who are really plugged in with the NFL and about the draft, the more I hear and see that Bo Nix may be able to really make a case for himself this week. I'm excited to see Michael Penix Jr. throwing against some of these guys, because I think his 2 healthy seasons at Washington, yes, he's going to get asked tons of questions about the season-ending injuries at Indiana. Like, health is an issue. But his 2 healthy seasons in Washington were quite a statement. And you can say, okay, well, he didn't look that good in the national championship game. Looked real good when he was throwing against Texas. Looked real good when he was throwing against a very good Oregon defense. So I don't think that Penix is going to come out there and look any different than he looked at Washington. I think he's going to be throwing darts when he gets out there. Knicks, I'm really excited to see. Spencer Rattler from South Carolina, I am really excited to see, because Spencer Rattler has the arm talent of the top quarterbacks in this draft, but it didn't always show up on the field. You had, the 2022 season where he put it all together for a couple of games at the end of the season, but it never, you didn't see it before that. And then this past year, I don't know if they had the offensive line to protect him enough to really show what he could do. So that's another one I'm very excited. Michael Pratt from Tulane, who had a great college career, American Athletic Conference Player of the Year. Now he gets to play against all these guys coming from the power conference schools. And look, he's done that before. You saw him beat USC in the bowl game after the 22 season. So there's a lot to like about this group of quarterbacks. Joe Milton from Tennessee. So why is Joe Milton at the Senior Bowl? You heard Jim Nagy say it when he was a guest on the show. The NFL scouts want to see Joe Milton. They're intrigued by Joe. They see the size, they see the arm, they see the body, and they think, oh man, what didn't happen in college? What could we do? Could we do anything differently? I think that's what they're going to look at. I don't think it means that Joe Milton can rocket up to a first-round grade, but I do think that he can make a case for himself and say, look, I can figure this out. Or if it doesn't work out for him, then the NFL scouts will say, all right, we now have seen what we wanted to see. We now understand why it worked out the way it did at Tennessee and at Michigan. So all really interesting stuff. It's a pretty star-studded Senior Bowl, star-studded offensive line, D lines. That's one of my favorite things, is the one-on-one pass protection drills at practice. Those are awesome to watch. It is like watching bull elephants go up against each other. And that is the highlight. So if you want to find me at practice, when those guys go off into the corner to do the one-on-one pass pro, that's where I'm going, because it is so much fun. And there are guys like Cooper Beebe from Kansas State, who we've had on the show, Christian Jones from Texas, who we've had on the show, Tavondre Sweat, the D tackle from Texas, is going to be there. There's a lot of dudes that are going to be going at it in the trenches, and it's going to be so much fun. I cannot wait, and we'll talk about it tomorrow on the show, because we'll get to watch some of practice. We'll get to talk to some of the guys, and then Wednesday as well, and Thursday. So going to be an action-packed week here on the show. But first, we got to talk rankings, because nothing makes people happier or madder than rankings, especially recruiting rankings. Your team's guy went up in the final ranking. Oh, yeah. You guys got it right. Your team's guy went down. What do you guys know? Charles Power joins us to explain how all of this works. It is a big, big day at On3. The final class of 2024 rankings have been revealed. The man in charge of putting all those together, Charles Power, joins us now. Besides having a name that sounds like something Homer Simpson would change it to become more dynamic, Charles, what have you been up to these last, basically since you started on On3, because you were already on a lot of these guys at that point. But how long has this process taken to get from basically all of the high school players in the class of 2024 to this list?
Yeah, we start each cycle really two years out from today, or maybe even a little more than that. It's the first time we really sort out and kind of make our initial spreadsheet and go through all of the prospects is after their freshman season. So man, it's like I guess close to a 3-year process that we're going through and closely evaluating these prospects, and it's fun. There'll be guys that will follow for 3 or 4 years, and there'll be some that come up on the radar, the last couple months, essentially as huge senior risers. So there's no real defined arc for them, which is really what makes it fun, and it's all evolving in real time. So it's kind of trying to hit a moving target, and that's why like this last ranking is the most fun to me, because it's all of the information, all of the exposure, all of the film, all the stats are really stationary for the only time in this entire process. So it's really, really fun to kind of sit back, the past couple weeks and sift through, everything. And a lot of these prospects are already on college campuses. So it's not going to be too long before we start to see them making plays.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like I think about how much this has all changed. Like every time I watch Chris Jones play, and obviously he's leading the Chiefs into the Super Bowl again, but that was a guy that Mississippi State tried to hide from everybody. They didn't want anybody to find out about him. And then he blows up at the postseason All-Star games and winds up on all these final rankings. And now it feels like you can't hide anybody. Like all these guys are known commodities, but you still have people who surprise you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And that's funny. I remember the Chris Jones thing. That's exactly how it was. I think he showed up at the Alabama Mississippi All-Star game that year. Everybody's like, who is this? And then of course, like I think he ended up like top 5 in the cycle. And really, I guess it's probably played at that level in the NFL, despite being like, I guess he was like a second round pick. But yeah, I mean, that's really the fun thing. Like one of the funnest parts of this job and just tracking recruiting is kind of the discovery process, seeing a guy when he has an offer or two and they blow up into national recruits. And I think the way the information is disseminated now, in how much film is available. I think back when I started doing this, we were getting film on DVDs, and now it's all not even on YouTube. It's at like on Huddle. It's at, the games are uploaded within an hour or so of conclusion on Friday nights. So we're in the information age with recruiting, and everything is readily available. I think it makes for identification of these top prospects easier and easier and earlier for sure.
Yeah, you can see those whole games now. You don't necessarily get fooled by the highlight films.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I'll start with the guy at the top of our list, and he's probably at the top of anybody's list who was watching these guys play. Jeremiah Smith, the Ohio State receiver signee, and he's already on campus at Ohio State. Was he one that just jumped off right away and you thought, okay, this guy's going to be a top 10 type player all along?
Yeah, Jeremiah Smith is interesting. He has always been a national prospect, right? I think he was like a top 50, top 75 type coming out of his freshman, sophomore year. Really had a great finish to his sophomore year at Chaminade Madonna. But what really excites me about Jeremiah Smith is he has gotten steadily better over the course of his high school career. And that's kind of a common marker you see with these top prospects and guys who really kind of launch into college from a developmental standpoint. Jeremiah Smith has put on 40 plus pounds, in his time in high school. He has gotten increasingly more athletic. If you look at his track times, he went from running, probably average marks in the hurdles to being the state champion. So this is a guy who has really improved physically and technically. He is one who is a master technician. He's just very dedicated to his craft. You can see with the intent with which he practices. So he has the 5-star work ethic to go with just the natural ability. And I think that's what makes him a special prospect. I mean, we have to go very far back to find a receiver prospect who's more advanced at this stage. He's 6'3", 215 with like, he looks like he could be on an NFL field right now and is the best route runner in the class. That is extremely rare. So, and it's the best receiver cycle that I've evaluated. And I think it's a historic group. So, for him to be at the top of that and the top overall prospect is, I think about as high as praise as you could give him.
Well, I'm sorry, rest of the Big Ten. You thought you were getting away from Marvin Harrison Jr. and you thought that was going to be okay, but yeah, now this guy shows up, and Ohio State still has a bunch of other really good receivers too. Let's talk about a couple of guys that signed with Florida. DJ Lagway and LJ McCray. So you got a quarterback from Texas, you got an edge rusher from Daytona Beach. These are the cornerstones of Billy Napier's class. Now, I think they thought the class was going to be a little bit deeper, but this is the type of talent that hasn't signed with Florida really since the Muschamp days.
Yeah, I mean, DJ Lagway, I think had clearly the best senior season of any quarterback in the 2024 cycle, and that's one thing that we've kind of been saying all along, right? With our evaluation processes, the senior season at quarterback is the best predictor historically of kind of projecting success at the position. And Lagway showed a bunch of improvement as a senior. He was just put up just eye-popping stats and led his team to their best season. I think in school history, deep playoff run. They lost in the playoffs to one of the best teams in the country, DeSoto, and he was making big plays in that game. So I think he had 74 total touchdowns, threw for over 4,600 yards, 72% completion percentage. I think his yards per attempt was 11.5, ran for 900 yards, maybe 15, 16 touchdowns. So gets it done through the air. I think he's arguably the top arm talent in the cycle, in addition to being the most mobile top quarterback in the cycle. So has a complete skill set at quarterback. And I think DJ Lagway has room to improve. And just with his accuracy and consistency, but I think that should be viewed as a positive because he's already a fantastic player. I mean, he's Gatorade National Player of the Year. I think the fact he has upside to continue to improve should be exciting for Florida fans. LJ McCray was similar on the defensive side. I think he arguably had the best senior season of any defender nationally. Had 37 tackles for loss, led Daytona Malin to their first state title, I believe, in 20 years. A guy who has always kind of been a high upside prospect at like 6'6", 290, runs laser time in the 4.9s. But he flipped the switch as a senior, play with outstanding effort level, physical. He's ranked as a defensive lineman, but and I think he'll continue to get bigger once he gets in Florida's program. Could be a 300+ pounder, but he has the athleticism and skill level to play on the edge. So a guy you could kind of line up anywhere in the front to take advantage of mismatches. But there's no doubt both those guys are huge pickups for the Gators.
So we're talking about maybe like a slightly smaller Deion Walker type player. That'd be pretty scary.
Yeah. I mean, I think he has that type of potential, and probably would remind you a little bit of some of the guys that like Georgia's had in recent years, like the big defensive ends who can slide down inside and pass rush situations. So he brings a lot to the table.
So Charles, who do you think out of this bunch can make the biggest instant impact as a freshman?
Yeah, I would look at the receivers for sure. Jeremiah Smith, Cam Coleman at Auburn. I think Cam Coleman at Auburn is a special receiver talent. He has the biggest catch radius of anybody in the cycle, and is an elite athlete as well. He's probably the freak of this receiver group at 6'3.5", 190, just with his athleticism, ball skills, kind of a rare combination there. And then you have a guy like Ryan Williams at Alabama who's going to be playing his freshman season as a 17-year-old. He's the biggest deep threat in the cycle, and a guy who I think projects as a star in Kalen DeBoer's offense. So I would start off with the receivers. I think that's kind of the special position group in 2024. But also I would look at Ellis Robinson at Georgia. You look at kind of what Georgia's lost at corner. Ellis Robinson is extremely ready to play. I think he's going to come in with the mindset to lock down a starting role in Athens. And that's one thing that really impressed me. In addition to just his cover instincts and ball skills, he does not back down from top competition. And I think of any corner we saw in the cycle, he had the best go of it with Jeremiah Smith and Cam Coleman in these kind of national all-star situations. So I don't think he's going to be swimming in the SEC when you throw him out there. And on the line, I would say Jordan Seaton would be my pick with
Colorado
offensive tackles. Yeah, at Colorado. I think he's going to be in a good spot to play early. He's extremely polished, and there's certainly a need there at Colorado. I think they're bringing him in with the intent to play.
So you mentioned like Ryan Williams reclassifying, and you used to hear about people reclassifying, but it usually was a quarterback who took that QB red shirt where they maybe did an extra year in middle school and were a year ahead of their class. You got these guys coming in very young now. You've got Ryan Williams at Alabama. You've got Colin Hurley, the quarterback at LSU. What happened there that started getting these guys so excited to go so early?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a developing trend. I think we saw that. I'm trying to think. We saw it with quarterbacks. Jake Bentley did it. JT Daniels did it. I think once prospects were kind of on that accelerated track to graduate early, it kind of became a reality. I think NIL probably sped it up as well, getting to college quickly and kind of seeing that. I think, the NIL era probably expedited that some. I think that's when we kind of seen players at other positions do it more and more often. It's going to be very interesting to go back and look at these players who have reclassified and kind of see the track record there. I think the track record at quarterback we probably have enough of to say it's pretty spotty. But so many elite prospects. There's enough elite prospects doing it to where it's going to be interesting to kind of weigh at other positions. But like a guy like Ryan Williams he was such a prolific high school player. Had 70 total touchdowns the last 2 seasons. I think it was a deal where he probably didn't have a lot more to prove, at the high school level. And I think that's kind of how a lot of these prospects look at it. I've generally speaking a fan of playing out your high school career because I think development is such a big thing. And I think typically in football, and this goes for I think college to the NFL as well, you want to be as good as you can possibly be before you like matriculate to the next level. So I think you really need to be sure that you're ready to go because if you're projecting a lot of these guys as 3 and out types, you're kind of looking at wanting to be able to play as a freshman if that's the case. And I think you want to make sure that you're as good as you can be if you want to try to play as a freshman.
So Charles, you have some that don't match the other companies in the industry, and that's going to happen, and that they'll have some that won't match ours. Do you ever feel a little weird when you're way out ahead on a guy and you've got a guy way in front of some other people? I'll ask you some names because there's one especially that intrigued me. Lugard Idakpai. So he's a 6'6", 220-pound signee for Michigan, for Bowie, Maryland. You got him ranked number 40. And the next highest he's number 158 in 24/7. He's 258 in ESPN, and Rivals doesn't even have him in the top 300. So what is it about him that makes you so high on him?
Yeah, that's once we kind of get out of the group of prospects that we all kind of as an industry have a massive exposure to, that's really kind of where you see the biggest variance, in my opinion, kind of within the rankings. And Lugard Idakpai is a great example of that. I think a lot of it hinges on film evaluation, information you get. Like in his case, he was a guy who was a probably the biggest late bloomer among national prospects in this cycle. I don't think he got his first Power 5 offer until September of his senior year. A guy who has a basketball background, kind of late to football, 6'6" and a half, 215, 220, elite length. I think his arms are around 34, 35 inches, big frame. He's a guy who, is certainly a long-term projection, but projecting him into Michigan's program, he's the type of edge prospect that Michigan will bring in, sit him for 2 or 3 years, and then he blows up in the Big Ten. Everybody's like looking around saying, okay, like who is this? Where did this guy come from? They have a track record of doing that, and he's that guy in this class. I think, similar situation, but maybe popped a little earlier. Kenneth Grant was one that we were much higher on.
My favorite player in college football.
Yeah, I knew you would like that. We were much higher on him, and he's a guy who probably took a year or so to get acclimated to like just the program and playing college football, and then kind of exploded as a sophomore. Like James Pierce was a guy like that at Tennessee as well. I think we had him as number 11 in the cycle, and I don't think it was very similar to Lugard Idakpai. He was a 5-star for us, and then I don't think he was maybe around 150 like throughout the industry, but that was just like a film evaluation and one where you're projecting just the athleticism and traits kind of taking over, exactly college football.
Another guy who kind of fits that profile, you got Weston Davis higher than a lot of other people. He's a offensive tackle prospect who signed with LSU. He's 6'5", 285, basketball guy. Also, how much of the basketball part of it or the other sports, maybe they run track, maybe they throw weights, maybe they wrestle. How much of that factors into these evaluations?
I mean, I think it provides a lot of context for multiple reasons. One, we gauge our rankings, kind of judge our rankings on the NFL draft. And if you study the backgrounds of most of these high draft picks, top players in college football, guys who ultimately become NFL stars, they're almost always is a multi-sport background. So I think it's highly informative just to the baseline, athleticism, coordination, spatial awareness. It helps all of that. And I think with track, for instance, that is probably the best way to gauge speed nowadays, because most of those times are electronic, they're verified. We know if they're like wind dated or not, and it's probably the best aside from going to a camp and seeing guys run beside each other. or knowing exactly what timing systems are being used. Track and field is a really, really strong indicator of athleticism. Even that, and that goes even with shot put with offensive and defensive linemen. Is when you look at that stuff, it's like, and you look at the data, it's proves to be like fairly predictive, of athleticism and like explosive power.
So you mentioned basing things on the NFL draft, and so does that mean positional value is incorporated in the same way? Like, do you have to be a really, really good running back to be ranked high in these rankings?
Yeah, the positional values is baked in. I think the way we look at it is we try to have our numbers for the most part mirror kind of what you would see in the NFL draft, whether that's the first round, top 100, the draft in total. Our numbers are generally pretty tight there. Because I think you just need to really be kind of up to speed with how much value the NFL and really college teams are kind of placing at these specific positions. So we try not to be too far out of whack there. But when you get to a case like a Jeremiah Smith, for instance, probably unlikely Jeremiah Smith's going to be the number one pick in the NFL draft. But I think when you're in a cycle like this, where there's not necessarily a no doubt number one type overall at other premium positions like quarterback, offensive tackle, pass rusher, he's the guy that you feel like has the highest kind of draft floor as a guy who is probably the best bet to be a top 5, top 10 pick out of this group. And I think one parallel in recent years would probably be the 2019 cycle with Derek Stingley. I think there was a feeling that Derek Stingley just had, an extremely high floor from a draft perspective as a cornerback. He was probably the surest thing in that cycle. I think he was ranked number 2 probably across the industry, if not number 1, and ended up being the 3rd pick in the draft. So that's kind of a parallel that I would draw with Jeremiah Smith in this cycle.
So when you put your finishing touches on this, do you shed a little tear, or is it just straight on to 2025?
It's honestly probably straight on to 2025. I think we I don't know, we might take a little time to celebrate or say our thank yous, but for the most part, it's quick transition into 2025. And honestly, I've kind of been holding off people wanting to talk about 25. Like, hey man, like we're wrapping up 24 here, but I think my analogy for switching cycles that quickly is kind of like you're like learning a new language. You're kind of reacquainting yourself with the 25 prospects. We've been pretty hardcore in 24 for the past month or so. So I'm looking forward to the reintroduction to 2025 and diving into those guys within the next couple weeks to month.
Well, you got to. They're committing like crazy.
They are.
One thing when they're all committing in May. Now they're all committing in January.
They are. I mean, it's going to be quick. I mean, I think most of these guys are going to be committed within the next 6 or 7 months. So, and then we're going to watch their senior years and kind of do this all over again. But that's the fun thing about recruiting. It's always fresh. There's always something new. It's always a new group, and that's like the challenge and the fun part of this job, but also the fun part of following it as a fan, I think too. So it's kind of always it presents a new possibility for your team to land a top guy.
That's exactly right. And you see, Charles Power doesn't hate your team, everybody. He loves your team. He loves your players. That's right. In their own way. Some of them in a 3-star way, some in a 4-star way, and some of them in a 5-star way. Charles, thank you so much.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Andy.
That is Charles Power, and that is a man who knows that every ranking he makes will be parsed, and he will make some people happy and some people very, very angry. And we've seen that. And that's why I asked about some of the guys that he has much higher than everybody else, because sometimes as an evaluator, you just believe in somebody's traits, and we see it all the time. Like, again, I'm at the Senior Bowl. We see it in the NFL draft all the time, where you hear about the scout who stood on the table for this one particular guy, and maybe everybody else didn't quite believe. But that's how some of this stuff happens. It is not homogenous across these things, and guys still get missed. You still have 0-star recruits who become great college football players. You have 5-star recruits who don't really do much, but that is also part of the fun of following all this, is you just don't know. I do know, though, we have our matchup in the Super Bowl, Chiefs and the 49ers, and Fanduel is ready to help you enjoy that game even more. Super Bowl 2024 special. So sign up at fanduel.com/staples. If you make a $5 bet and win, you get $200 in guaranteed bonus bets. And they got some specials for this one. Very, very interesting. It could be like if you're trying to get that $5 winning bet and get your bonus bets, you may want to go with something that's, a little lower on the odds. So, for example, Patrick Mahomes and Brock Purdy combined for 50+ rushing yards. That's a plus 145. And I mean, watching both those guys play, knowing how good these defenses are, they're probably going to get flushed for the pocket a little bit. And you saw Brock Purdy, a very critical third down conversion with his legs late in the game for the 49ers. You've seen Patrick Mahomes do that. So maybe that's how you get those bonus bets. But if you wanted to go for something big time, you want to go for something where the odds are long, but the prize is sweet. 60+ yard field goal is plus 4,000. But guess what? Harrison Butker has hit a 62-yard field goal. The Chiefs kicker, he has hit a 62-yarder at Arrowhead. So it's possible he could hit one in Allegiant Stadium. So that one is a very interesting one. FanDuel.com/staples. You win a $5 bet, you get $200 in guaranteed bonus bets. Good luck to everybody. Get signed up, FanDuel.com/staples. Now your Nick Saban retirement update. If you are wondering how Nick Saban's retirement is going, it is going swimmingly. It is smashing. So his daughter, Kristen, posted this on X on Monday. Dad played golf with Travis Scott and 50 Cent like it was no big deal. Retirement is going too well. And it's a photo of Nick Saban and Travis Scott hanging at the tee box. Now, I want to see the 50 Cent portion of the proceeds here, of the proceedings here, because, well, one, is 50 Cent still as jacked as he used to be? How far does 50 Cent drive the ball? He looks like a man who's long off the tee. I want to know. Like, Travis Scott looks like he's more of a short game guy. And Nick Saban, curious to see how much better he's gotten at golf since retirement, because obviously there wasn't a ton of time to play golf while he was busy dominating at Alabama. But that is, man, it's doing it right. And Kristen, his daughter's Twitter feed has become an absolute gold mine. So I don't know if everybody's watching. There was a thread the other day about, hey, what do you think Miss Terry's to-do list has been for Nick in his retirement? And people were going back and forth. And Kristen chimed in, and then somebody asked Kristen if she had any pictures or video of Nick Saban surfing. And she came up with video of Nick Saban boogie boarding. This was a few years ago. This was when he was still the coach at Alabama. But if we're going to get unfettered access to the camera roll of Nick Saban's daughter to see how he's enjoying his retirement, I'm all for it. This is just bring me the updates every single day. But yes, retirement is going fantastically for Nick Saban, just in case you were wondering. Now, Deion Sanders hasn't retired yet, but his sons are already talking about buying him a house. Coach Prime, as far as we know, this house has not been purchased yet, but Shedeur and Shiloh got together, the Sanders sons, and Deion Jr. got together and took Deion out to this mansion in Colorado and said, hey, we're thinking about getting this thing for you, and we're going to chip in and get it for you. And that's, I mean, look, the NIL stuff's going great for those guys. Obviously, Shedeur is probably going to be a pretty high NFL draft pick. So there is definite possibility that this could be the gift for dad, which, listen, I think we're all hoping that our kids are going to buy us something like that someday. But with Deion, you can tell he knows what's going on, because he gets in there and he goes, this is the gotta win house. Because now I know some of the places have reported that they already bought this thing, but according to one of the Colorado TV stations on Monday, it has not been purchased yet. So Deion understands they got to have a big year. They got to win. The The boys need to cash in on some more NIL. Shedeur needs to raise his draft stock. That's how you get that giant mansion, which, by the way, does apparently have a stock pond because we know Dion likes to fish in the offseason. We've seen that on his Twitter feed, and we've seen that on the Well-Off Media YouTube page. But it's interesting. We have not talked a ton about Dion this offseason, and I think it's probably because of the way last season ended. It was very disappointing, and they just couldn't get it back together. There was the panic demotion of Sean Lewis. You've now seen Sean Lewis head off to become the head coach of San Diego State. Charles Kelly just left to go to Auburn. He was the defensive coordinator. So it will be a little more quiet in Boulder, I would imagine. You got stuff like this. They'll go viral for some stuff every once in a while. But I don't think it's going to be the unfettered excitement that there was for Dion last season, because we're just going to have to see more. And I think Dion understands that. I think that's why he's looking around that house going, this is the guy to win house. That's not the 4-8 house. That's the maybe 7-5, 8-4 house. Because that's a reasonable expectation of improvement for Colorado. Now they're moving into the Big 12. I don't know that it's going to be that much easier than the Pac-12 was. The Big 12 will probably not have the elite at the top that this past year's Pac-12 did, but it will be deeper all around, if that makes sense. And they got a lot of work cut out for them. So I think we're going to be limited to the few times Colorado goes viral in the offseason for stuff like this, but it is not going to be us waiting with bated breath to see Colorado play like we were last season. What's this going to – and then obviously they beat TCU and then win a few games, and it just gets into just mania mode. I don't know if that's going to happen. They open with North Dakota State, by the way. That's a tough opener. And you do not want to lose to an FCS team if you are Dion. So even one of the best FCS teams. But we will find out what happens with Dion, and we'll stay tuned. We'll see if the boys decide to buy that house. And if my kids are watching, yes, that is exactly what I want you to do when you make some dough. Get dad a mansion. No, don't do that. Don't get dad a mansion. Dad doesn't need a mansion. Dad wouldn't mind a little beach bungalow, though. Dad would be cool with that. So if you guys are watching, just take some advice from Shiloh and Shedeur, but not so big and not so cold. That's how you do it. All right. Ran into one of my friends down here at the Senior Bowl, and one of my favorite people to talk to, Ramon Foster, was an offensive lineman for Tennessee from 2004 to 2008. He went on to a great career with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's back in Nashville doing radio now. One of the most interesting voices you will hear in the radio, and also just some great talk about Tennessee, where they are now, where they were when he finished up, because he was at Tennessee in a very interesting time. And then he talks about the guys he was living with at Tennessee. You want to talk about an inspirational group. It was pretty unbelievable. And one of those guys just got a big promotion because it's Jerod Mayo, former Vols linebacker, who is now the head coach of the New England Patriots. Let's talk to Ramon. Honored to be joined by a guy whose show I go on quite frequently, Ramon Foster of Ramon, Kayla, and Will on 104.5 The Zone in Nashville. But more importantly, former Vol for life.
Vol for life.
Ramon Foster. Ramon, this is a wild time. Like, I had a video recently. We caused a little stir in the Volunteer State because I said Tennessee is one of those teams that can make a jump in 2024.
Yeah.
And really, like, a 2-win jump for Tennessee would put Tennessee in the playoff, if you think about that.
That's 100% facts. I mean, if you look at the way the 12-game setup is going to be, it should, especially you look at conference strength of schedule and depending on the loss. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And the thing is, no Nick Saban anymore. Alabama comes to Knoxville. Like, okay, going to Athens, you can write that one off.
Yeah.
And we don't know what's going to happen. But I am just curious, what is it like as someone who is talking Vols pretty much every day? Now, you've been dealing with the Titans coaching change, so I understand you've been busy with that. But when Nico got in that bowl game and showed what he could do, how much did the excitement level change?
A ton, because almost at any level, high school, college, NFL especially, the quarterback matters. And I think when you see a guy that has promise after hearing the hype, because recruiting is one thing, but actually staying in the game is another. I've gone to school with numerous guys that were 4 or 5 stars, right? They'll use like, that's a 4 or 5 star, and they don't turn into it. So when you actually see it and the stories behind it is backed up because of the tape, that's when the optimism, hope takes you a very long way, man. And that's not just at Tennessee. That's almost any school. You look at the way coaches jump into the portal to find that next guy because that next guy might give them hope. So watching what Nico has done in that game against that defense, that's the other side of it too, with the majority of the starters in it. That gives you a lot of optimism for the upcoming season.
So we're here at the Senior Bowl. We're going to see Joe Milton against, some of the best players in college football. But that seems to be the thing. Like, can Nico be better than Joe? Because Joe was not able to be as good as Hendon Hooker.
Yeah, and that's where I think seeing him operate in that game actually gave people that insight. The one thing about Joe was this. You knew Joe could make every throw, but can he make it consistently? And it looked like Nico was capable of doing that in that bowl game. Again, I got to mention that defense because they got so much praise about how good they are and the amount of, yards they gave up. And the separator for me, and honestly, Joe and Nico so far was Nico's ability to use his legs. And then you look at him as a freshman, his size, he's long. He looked like a stick running, but of course the toughness showed up in those games, in those moments. So yeah, I think it's there. But the coolest thing is this: from Hendon to Joe to Nico, they've all had a relationship. It seems as if they've communicated and what the expectations are going to be. So I think having Nico sit and not being given to him immediately after high school can somewhat cater to his ability to be a little bit more savvy going into this year.
And you can speak to this having played there, because I try to explain to people the pressure at Tennessee, that it's very similar to Alabama, very similar to Ohio State, where it is the biggest thing in town. It is the biggest thing in the state, even though there are NFL teams and NBA teams and NHL teams, but it is the biggest thing in the state. And it does feel like when there is hope there, that it's kind of a, you better do this.
It is, but it's a good place to be because that should be the demand. When you look at that conference and how many national champions have come out of it, and you have, we can throw this in now, the collective, you have the fan base, you have the support, and you mean to tell me we are getting these players? You go from top 10 classes, 5 stars, like it is supposed to be that way, and you be idiotic to not be that way as a fan. So I have to tell people often, fan is short for fanatic. They're going to be crazy. And if you give them a little bit of light, it's going to take yourself to the next level. And that's what that fan base is. If you go to campus and you've been there during those games, I went to the one they beat the streak on Alabama, where Alabama won so long. I've never been a part of a stadium. I played in the Super Bowl too, to where it rocked and people were chaotic in a good way. And that right there, of course, you mentioned Nick Saban not being a part of it. It's got to be other fan bases around. It's not just Tennessee. It's Auburn. It's Texas A&M. It's Texas coming in. It's Oklahoma. Because you feel like, okay, the system in which Alabama had in place because of Nick, and I know their coach will do his thing too, and they have a crazy support system also. But it somewhat gives you an opportunity now to jump in and say, watch us do work. And that's where Tennessee is, and Auburn, and everybody else involved.
As a guy who played in the SEC, is it surreal thinking that Oklahoma and Texas are SEC schools now?
You know what? My wife's a part of these message boards that SEC orients it, right? And it's hilarious to watch them come in, because that's always been the conversation with us. You're an SEC guy. Can Texas hang in the SEC? Can Oklahoma hang in the SEC? It is somewhat surreal now, but we also get to see that up close and personal, because you hear about the rich recruiting bed that they have down there. So let's see what it looked like in SEC play now.
All right. So wait. Your wife is a message boarder.
She's a group, of course, of like SEC fans.
Okay.
And apparently the Texas and Oklahoma group has just come in.
Oh,
just
okay.
Big
they
dog.
came in hot.
Oh my gosh. They don't really know it's not illegal for us to do horns down, do they yet?
No, you can do it. It's all you want.
I can't wait to do it. Go ahead, though.
No, it will. I am laughing about that, because I don't think you can complain to the conference office about that in the SEC. I don't think it's going to go over very well.
How doggy dog it is in the SEC.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Because I think about it, how many guys have Gator chomped after they've beaten Florida in the swamp. Like I remember Auburn's kicker doing it.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It ain't even just football. The basketball teams do.
Oh yeah.
Okay, you know what I'm saying? Oh, I've heard everything from Rocky Flop to all of it. That's what we do. So welcome, Big 12.
Yeah, it'll be fun to see it. But so I got to talk to you about your time at Tennessee.
Yeah.
Very interesting time. Your senior year was 2008. That was the last year of Coach Fulmer.
Mm-hmm.
And you came in with huge expectations as a team, and it didn't go the way it. What did you come away from that season learning?
I came away learning earning is a whole lot more than just giving.
Yeah.
That I was there from 04 to 08, and that was a transition into bigger recruiting sites, 4 and 5 stars emphasis. You also had Nick Saban coming into the league, you had Urban Meyer come in and win, Les Miles. All these guys came in and won early. So the need and push, the arms race to get uber amounts of talent and not develop, I think is somewhat what kind of took us over. And when you have Urban come in and win 2, and then you have Nick and then Les, I mean, look at how it's shaped up in the SEC. It kind of forced you to move quicker, and that meant like getting young guys out on the field. And I think when you look at how you build teams, you gotta somewhat set the culture and earn it in college a little bit sooner, unless you're going into the portal now. It's a little bit different. But I came away from that season saying, if you're going to win it, you got to win it the hard way. At the end of the day, the teams that play in the championships and win them, they go about it the hard way. And that was one of the storylines this year, I think, with Michigan. Yeah. Michigan had a very brutal and tough practice regimen, and it benefited them throughout the course of the season, beating SEC schools and doing what they did in the national championship. So I look at the way Heupel is built in Tennessee right now, and it seems to be that way, to where guys have to go get it and prove that you belong on that field, because there's no cupcakes in college football, but especially in the SEC, and I'm biased like that.
Well, and it does seem like that the cupcake factor has gone down, because you have these schools that are taking the bottom of Georgia's roster and the bottom of Alabama's roster, and those guys are becoming starters at those schools now.
They are, but of course you got to stay in tune to what type of players you need and can they fit your system. And of course, if it works out that you can pull a guy that's a 4-star that's buried at middle linebacker, you take him. Yeah. I used to get upset about. It's like, you can't go play Valor. You can't go play. No, that's the game. You either getting better or you getting worse. And if you're not in this arms race, man, then you gotta fight back however way you can, and you better be very dynamic of a play caller.
Though you were an offensive lineman, we still have not seen tons of offensive linemen go in the portal. I have theories about that based on personality traits. And is it just that linemen are loyal? Linemen don't like change. Linemen just don't want to move.
You know what it is? Linemen don't get the big checks.
Yeah,
that's probably where you start. Though. They are now, and that goes a long way though too. But offensive line play is mostly development. If I like a position coach, I'm gonna probably stick with that position coach. Even if I have to sit for a year or two, I'm going to sit with that position coach, because it's about development. If there's very few guys that come in and are just like freshman starters, and because it's so physical, there's a jump from high school to college. I know Alabama had a true freshman star, but he was also a perennial 5-star guy from the get-go. That's rare. Not Georgia doesn't have that often. LSU doesn't have that often. These teams, Ohio State may, but like there's very few programs that can jump in. But it's also all about development, getting stronger, understanding the game. Technique matters more in the trenches.
So let's talk about the guys you played with, and specifically the guys you lived with, because you've talked about this house full of guys, and it's crazy, because you who went to the Steelers, played a Super Bowl, successful radio career now, Jerod Mayo, the new coach of the New England Patriots, Inky Johnson, who got hurt, worried, maybe he's
bigger than all of us.
Yeah, he's one of the biggest motivational speakers in the country. Yeah. Like how did you guys kind of come together?
Just same-minded, like-minded people. That's essentially what it was, man. We are all just kind of weeded out which navigation, path we were going to walk, and we kind of found each other. Now, Inky was my sweet mate, my roommate right next door, and Jerod was right down the hallway, and we somehow every single time found ourselves around each other. Yeah. Rob was just a pest to us.
So Robert Ayers?
Yeah, Robert Ayers also. So it was myself, Jerod Mayo, Inky Johnson, Robert Ayers, who also went first round. He's now a coach at Tennessee, and Sinclair Cannon, who's a 4-star, I think, coming out of South Carolina at the time. And just like-minded people. I always tell people your circle matters. So we ended up rooming together and everything, and very unique relationship to this day.
Well, that's what you were telling me about Robert Ayers, like that he used to just hang around and be like, okay, I see what y'all are doing, and it seems to be going okay, so I probably should just be hanging around with you guys.
You know how it is in college. Everybody has their group initially, and then you find the ones who are on the same thing. And Rob used to literally come to our apartment on campus and sit at the top of the steps after we were done with class and just, what the heck y'all been in? Not in those words. And just wait on us, and not just wait on us. I don't want to make it seem like he was waiting around for us, but we got really super tight, and he made himself around us because everybody has stuff that happens early in their career. And when you are on the right path, doing the right thing, even if it seems corny, you know, how people are, oh, you guys are corny. No, we got a purpose. And that purpose is getting to the next level, however that's going to look.
Now, for those who don't know, Inky Johnson was a great DB. He got hurt, and it was a terrible injury. And there were, worries about him losing his arm.
We thought he was close to dying from what we understood.
And he has become literally one of the most sought after motivational speakers in the country. Was he like that as a player, or was he like that at home?
A 2-star. Okay. So you know that coming in as a 2-star from inside Atlanta, he tell you all the time, Zone 6 East Atlanta is where he's from. Like, he's actually from that and grew up a hard way, like most football players do that come from, lower income places. And he just had this grind about him. It's authentic when you hear Inky speak, but if you talk to him, it's the exact same way too. So yes, he was like that. And one thing I'll say about our group was this: very transparent with one another, unapologetic on how we talk to one another too. And it was all truth and no fluff in between. The times where I was struggling, Inky was a guy, and I never forget he said this. We'd be frustrated because he got red-shirted too. And we go to workouts, come back together to the dorms and stuff. And he'd always say, he called me this to this day, big homie. Cream rises to the top. And I'm like, okay. And he's just say, when you look at it, all that crap settles to the bottom and the cream rises. To this day, he says that to me when we're talking about certain things. So yes, he's always been that way. It's just the tragedy helped amplify that even more.
And I still watch the video because he posts them every day. And you want to wake up, get pumped. If you just follow Inky Johnson on Twitter,
run through a wall, I promise. But here's the thing with those types of people that do motivate, you sometimes talk to them off, saying, you're like, oh, who the heck is this? When you talk to Ink, you get that authenticity that I don't think you get from many others that do what he does.
And meanwhile, now you got Jerod Mayo, who we knew was going to be a head coach in the NFL sooner rather than later, but now he's replacing Bill Belichick. You're like, hey, no pressure.
Crazy, man. Here's the thing about Jerod. From the day that he came in, from a military family too. His family is from the DMV area, or he's from the Tidewater area of Virginia. I think DMV got switched up one day from us. So he's from the Tidewater area of Virginia. Very highly concentrated talent that comes out of the VIX. So many guys come out of that area. Jerod's had that business goal-oriented mindset from the day he got on campus. He said, I'm doing 3 years and I'm out. And he meant every bit of it. We all played a part in how we got to our point to where Rob, first round, now coaching at Tennessee. Inky does his thing. Jerod's now a head coach. I ended up playing 11 years, and Sinclair Cannon's a business owner in South Carolina. We all played a part in figuring out how we're going to get to that point. But Jerod, I would almost say, somewhat said it because his conversations were different. We go out, but we went party crazy. We do our thing, but like the main thing was always the main thing. I never saw somebody grind as hard as he did to come back from his ACL injury than he did. And he set that goal, pretty much laid it out for us. And we all looked out for each other. So I never forget when he ended up going pro, one of the first things he did was the coolest thing he did. He gave us his Nike accounts. Like, hey, y'all my guys, go, because it was more motivation. And that's always been his thing, super cerebral. And is a straight truth teller. And that's why he is where he is right now, I think.
What's it going to be like for you to see him lead them out next season?
Man, so the entire process was crazy. Before the news broke, of course, everything was already set for him to take over.
Yeah, it was in the contract.
He FaceTimed us the night before, and we've been hearing and we talk, and he kind of told me one thing or another, right? Told us all. When we got that FaceTime and I saw 5 faces on it, I'm like, oh my, I got the screenshot of it just to save it And you ought to see the smiles on it, because to think one of your friends, we all got successful friends. You do too, right? Very successful.
I don't have anybody coaching Patriots.
But to see that, it was beyond cool, because again, you saw him have that type of mindset even back then. A play caller in his sophomore year at UT, so he understands how to lead. I'll be honest with you, a portion of me is overly excited for him. The other half is like, but it's the Patriots. No.
That's the Steelers you coming out here. That's right.
But I got to root for my friend, man, because it's not common you have this type of success.
Well, I cannot wait to see it. And it has been fun. As when you took over that show, I was coming on every week, and it has been a lot of fun watching you grow into this career. But man, I will never forget, because it was, I think it was 2020.
Yeah.
You started and you said you were mad at me because I was predicting not a great season for Tennessee. I actually predicted a better one they had.
Yeah.
But you were like, no, 10 wins. I'm like, what?
I did say that. I did. And I'm passionate about my Vols, like most fan bases, right? And I was understanding the fan side versus the actual side is where I'm at now. I'm a little bit more governed now. Okay.
That's
I'm
right.
like, bring it back, because you got to look at all things. And now that
you
I'm
got to deal
into
with callers now.
I do. And I got to look at what recruiting is, what other teams have done now. So I understand how you break this down, and to why your analysis of it was more accurate than mine.
Well, but then I got it wrong, and you got it right that first cycle year. So
yeah,
it all comes back around.
We talk a lot. We're gonna be wrong, right?
Exactly right. Exactly right. Ramon Foster, thank you so much.
No problem, man. Anytime.
The great Ramon Foster, and he's so much fun. If you get a chance, if you're in Nashville, they're on in the mornings on 104.5 The Zone, but they also you can listen to it on the internet. Ramon, Kalen will do a great job, and he is one of my favorites, because the combination of Tennessee Vol and Pittsburgh Steeler, there are no more loyal people than that, and an offensive lineman to boot. So he's a fun one. All right, I'm in Mobile. I get to watch some Senior Bowl practices tomorrow. You know where to find me. One-on-one pass protection, large people hitting each other. It's going to be spectacular. I'll tell you all about it tomorrow. We will talk to you on Tuesday night.